Welcome, everyone, to Empowering Survivors. What are we doing today? We're talking about Maui, in particular, the wildfires that hit Lahaina and the area of Maui and the devastation that's happened over there. From the last count that I saw, there was approximately, over 100 people have reportedly died, and the amount is expected to rise. There are at least 1,000 people still missing, and with something like wildfire that went so quickly and devastated so much in such a quick period of time, there is a possibility that those 1,000 people are no longer with us. So before we continue, just wanted to take a moment to do a moment of silence for those victims, families, missing persons, and everyone who's involved in the rescue and the recovery efforts. So this is Maui. And right here, these are, this is Lahaina, right here on the west side here. And then it's delineated here, the West Maui wildfires. So this is where, and then so when people were evacuating and going into the ocean, that's where they were going, right into the ocean here. And then it says that there's another upcountry Maui wildfire over here. And I thought that there was a third one, maybe over here somewhere. So those are the, at least per Google Maps. I didn't want to show where the wildfires were. I just wanted to show the map of Maui. And so they were saying one side looks like a third world country, disaster zone, and the other side is people are having 5-star dinners. So I thought that was a really interesting comparison she made. So with that, I wanted to share what can we do? What are some learning lessons, right? Like, it's really easy to criticize everyone. It's really easy to criticize FEMA, the Hawaii disaster zone, the government, the police, the firefighters. But, what are some learning lessons here? Let's read about communication, because, I read this and without getting into any type of conspiracy theory or anything like that, because I don't think that necessarily serves anyone. But what are some obvious ways to improve the situation for the future, right? Because we can't take back what happened, but we can learn from it. And one of those is the communication system. They have a communication system in place for tsunamis and earthquakes. So why wasn't that used? Especially if communication was down as far as like cell phone towers and things like that. So here's an article this is from ABC News. In deadly Maui wildfires, communication failed. Chaos overtook Lahaina along with the flames. The hours before a wildfire engulfed the town of Lahaina, Maui County officials failed to activate sirens that would have warned the entire population of the approaching flames, and instead relied on a series of sometimes confusing social media posts. Well, that's interesting. It says burnt boats sit in waters. So even the boats were on fire. In the hours before a wildfire engulfed the town of Lahaina, of course, there's another ad. Maui County officials failed to activate sirens that would have warned the entire population of the approaching flames, and instead relied on a series of sometimes confusing social media posts that reached a much smaller audience. Power and cellular outages for residents further stymied communication efforts. Radio reports were scarce, some survivors reported, even as the blaze began to consume the town. Roadblocks then forced fleeing drivers onto one narrow downtown street, creating a bottleneck that was quickly surrounded by flames on all sides. At least 80 people have been confirmed dead so far. So this is a couple of days old. The silent sirens have raised questions about whether everything was done to alert the public in a state that possesses an elaborate emergency warning system for a variety of dangers, including wars, which is kind of interesting, hurricanes, volcanoes, and including wars, volcanoes, hurricanes, and wildfires. And I imagine that they had to have some system in place from back from Pearl Harbor days, right? Where there were literal wars happening. Hector Bermudez left his apartment at Lahaina Shores shortly after 4:30 p.m. Tuesday after the smell of smoke woke him up from a nap. He asked his neighbor if he was also leaving. He said, "No, I am waiting for the authorities to see what they are going to do," Bermudez recounted. And I said, "No, no, no, please go. This smoke is going to kill you. You have to go. Please. You got to get out of here. Don't wait for nobody." And it's interesting because I don't live in California. I've never lived in California, but you see and you've heard reports from people who lost their homes and how quickly the wildfires went in. And this was even faster than that. But you don't play with those things. So maybe because he was elderly in this case, harder to move around. But those are the types of things. It's like, sure, maybe in some cases, evacuating might be worse, but there needs to be a plan. I think this is a big wake up call for many people of having a plan. I know in California, they have their to-go bags ready in case they need to evacuate quickly. His neighbor, who was about 70 and has difficulty walking, refused. Bermudez doesn't know if he survived. Officials with Maui's emergency management agency did not immediately respond Friday to questions about sirens and other communications issues. Hawaii's Attorney General Ann Lopez said her office will be conducting a comprehensive review of decision-making and standing policies surrounding the wildfires. "My department is committed to understanding the decisions that were made before and during the wildfires and to sharing with the public the results of this review," adding that now is the time to begin this process of understanding. The Associated Press created a timeline of the wildfires using information from multiple sources, including the county's announcements, state and local emergency management alerts, and interviews with officials and survivors. The timeline shows public updates on the fires were spotty and often vague, and much of the county's attention was focused on another dangerous, larger fire in the upcountry Maui, which I showed you a little bit ago. The Lahaina was one fire, but there was a dangerous, larger fire in the upcountry Maui that was threatening neighborhoods in Kula. It shows no indication that county officials ever activated the region's all-hazard siren system and reveals other emergency alerts were scarce. In the hours before the wildfires began, however, warnings about high winds were frequent and widely disseminated by the county and other agencies. A hurricane passing far to the south was expected to bring gusts of up to 65 miles per hour, residents were told on Monday. The upcountry fire started first, reported not long after midnight on Tuesday, and the first evacuations near Kula followed. The fire near Lahaina started later, around 6:37 a.m. Tuesday. Some homes in Lahaina's most inland neighborhood were evacuated, but by 9:55 a.m., the county reported the fire was fully contained. Still, the announcement included another warning that high winds would remain a concern for the next 24 hours. The power also went out early that morning, leaving several thousand customers in the Lahaina West Maui region and upcountry without electricity. Several downed power lines required repair. By 11 a.m., the firefighting crews from several towns and the Hawaii Department of Lands had converged on the upcountry fire, but wind gusts reaching 80 miles per hour. So that's even worse. So at first it was 65 miles per hour, now it's 80, made conditions unsafe for helicopters. At 3:20 p.m., more upcountry neighborhoods were evacuated. The Lahaina fire, meanwhile, had escaped containment and forced the closure of the Lahaina bypass road by 3:30 p.m. The announcement, however, didn't make it into a county fire update until 4:45 p.m. and didn't show up on the county Facebook page until nearly 5 p.m., when survivors say flames were surrounding the cars of families trapped downtown. So that was part of the bottleneck, that they barricaded some roadways, and so people were going, and you're going to major road, or not a major, but you're going through like the main roadway, and they're barricaded. So you're basically it was almost like a trap there. But while the Lahaina fire was spreading, Maui County and Hawaii Emergency Management Agency officials were making other urgent announcements. including a Facebook post about additional evacuations near the upcountry fire and an announcement that the acting governor had issued an emergency proclamation. In the upcountry evacuation Facebook post at 3:20 p.m., Fire Assistant Chief Jeff Gazea shared an ominous warning. The fire can be a mile or more from your house, but in a minute or two, it can be at your house. Mike Kicino lived below the Lahaina bypass in one of Lahaina's more inland neighborhoods. He went to his house at 3:30 p.m. and minutes later realized his neighborhood was quickly being enveloped by flames. He yelled to the neighbor kids to get their mom and leave. He ran inside to collect his wife and the dogs they were watching, and he, along with others in the neighborhood, then jumped to their cars to leave. He listened for announcements on his car radio, but said there was essentially no information. The government's social media attention turned from upcountry back to Lahaina at 4:29, when Hawaii EMA posted on X, formerly Twitter, that the local Maui EMA had announced an immediate evacuation for an inland subdivision in Lahaina. Residents were directed to shelter at the Lahaina Civic Center on the north side of town. Just before 5 p.m., Maui County shared a new Lahaina fire report on Facebook. Flare-up forces Lahaina bypass road closure. Shelter in place encouraged. Oh, so this is interesting. So remember a moment ago I said sometimes you want to evacuate, but that could actually be more dangerous. And, I'm just thinking about Florida with hurricanes. And what happens is that there's usually a cone of where it's going to go, projected cone. And if you're in in the center of that cone, you're definitely usually, if it's strong enough, encouraged to evacuate, especially if you're on the coast. And what happens though is sometimes there's bottlenecks or traffic, bumper to bumper traffic on the highways because so many people want to evacuate. But because Florida is so big and there's no certainty where it's going to go, just like here with the fires, evacuation or moving around could sometimes be more dangerous depending on where it goes. So I think that's where it's saying here that it said shelter in place instead of driving because of the road closures. So very interesting, and it just sounds so devastating. Clearly, that emergency siren system should have been placed, that should have been started, but it sounds like there was just utter chaos because they didn't know exactly what was happening. And they even said because of the high winds, the 80-mile-per-hour winds, that the helicopters, it was hard for the helicopters, who are probably the ones that were getting that aerial view of what was happening. It was dangerous for for helicopters. So I could see where this is definitely a chaotic situation. Many were already running from the flames. Lynn Robinson evacuated from her apartment near the waterfront's Front Street at 4:33. There was no warning. There was absolutely none. Nobody came around. We didn't see a fire truck or anybody. Lana Vieira left her neighborhood about a mile away around the same time. Her boyfriend had stopped by and told her he'd seen the approaching fire on the drive. He told me straight, "People are going to die in this town. You gotta get out," she recalled. There had been no sirens, no alerts from her phone, she said, but access to the main highway, the only road leading in and out of Lahaina, was cut off by barricades set up by authorities. You see, that's part of the issue here. The roadblocks forced people directly into harm's way, funneling cars onto Front Street. All the locals were pigeonholed into Lahaina in that corner there, and I felt like the county put us into a death trap. Nathan Baird and his family escaped by driving past the barricade. Traffic was all over the place. Nobody knew where to go. They were trying to make everybody go up the Civic Center, and it just didn't make sense to me. I was so confused. At first, I was like, why are all these people driving toward the fire? He and his wife became trapped by walls of flame as Front Street burned. They ran for the ocean, spending hours crouching behind the seawall or treading water in the choppy waves, depending on which area felt safest as the ever-changing fire raged. At 5:20, Maui County shared another Lahaina fire update on Facebook. So, of course, imagine if you're underwater, what are you doing? Looking to Facebook for updates? I mean, it's not realistic. Evacuations in one subdivision were continuing, but access to the main highway was back up. The U.S. Coast Guard's first notification about the fires was when the Search and Rescue Command Center in Honolulu received reports of people in the water near Lahaina at 5:45 p.m. The boats were hard to see because of the smoke, but Kicino and others used cell phones to flash lights at the vessels, guiding them in. He helped load children into the Coast Guard boats and at one point loaned his cell phone, which had been stashed in his wife's waterproof pouch, to a member of the guards so they could contact fire crews. He said the rescue took hours and he and his wife were finally brought out of Lahaina around 1 a.m. Maui County Facebook posts around 8:40 p.m. Tuesday Maui County Facebook posts around 8:40 p.m. urged residents in the surrounding area who weren't impacted by the fires to shelter in place and said smoke was forcing more road closures. A commenter pointed out the communication problem just before 9 p.m. You do realize that all communication to Lahaina is cut off and nobody can get in touch with anyone on that side. Okay, so the fire went from 0 to 100. I feel like the county really cost a lot of people's lives and homes that day. I felt like a lot of this could have been prevented if they just thought about this stuff in the morning and took their precaution. You live in a fire zone. They have a lot of fires. You need to prepare for fires. Pacino said it all felt like the county wasn't prepared and government agencies weren't communicating with each other. The all-hazard sirens are tested each month to ensure they are in working order. During recent tests within 2 weeks of the fires, they malfunctioned in 3 separate incidents in 3 counties. Maui's siren tone was too short, so officials repeated the test later that day successfully. Carl Kim directs the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center that develops training materials to help officials respond to natural disasters. Kim said it's too soon to know exactly how the warning and alert system might have saved more lives in Lahaina, and noted that wildfires are often more challenging to manage than volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and even earthquakes because they are more difficult to detect and track over time. The thing is that an earthquake could happen unexpectedly, and a tsunami can result very quickly from that. So, and the same with volcanic eruptions. So I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that statement. I think it's a wake-up call. We have to invest more in understanding of wildfires and the threats that they provide, which aren't as well understood. So one thing, and I didn't say it here, that I thought it was in here. I had read this earlier, that one of the issues is that they said that they didn't do the alert system because with tsunamis and especially with tsunamis, that when they hear those sirens, they are taught to go to inland, to the high land, to the high areas. And so if they would have heard the tsunami, or if they would have heard the warnings, then they would have been going right to the fire and potentially hurt more people. But really, at least if they would have heard the sirens, they could have tried to find more information. Maybe they could have turned on radios, right? People were just going to sleep and were waking up and starting to see the fires at 6:30 in the morning when people were maybe trying to go to work. Like they said, school was out. And so kids were staying home while their parents were out. So what happened to those kids? Where did they go? So I do believe that there is going to be a lot more, that there's probably going to be, unfortunately, children who passed away, parents who never made it back to their children. Maybe they couldn't even communicate with their kids. Now, this is a more recent article, and there is a little bit of overlap, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the Maui Emergency Chief continues to defend the decision not to activate the warning sirens. And remember, I alluded to that just a moment ago, and this is the response from the emergency chief. The leader of the Maui Emergency Management Agency is defending his department's decision not to activate a siren network to warn people last week that a fast-moving fire was descending upon Lahaina. Called an all-hazard system, the sirens are intended to be used for a variety of natural and human-caused events, including fires. The 4 sirens in the Lahaina area are part of what Hawaii calls the largest single integrated outdoor siren warning system for public safety in the world. Yet it wasn't enacted in one of the worst public safety disasters in the U.S. history, at least. But in practice, the system is used mainly for tsunami warnings. MEMA Administrator Herman Andaya said, and the Maui Emergency Management Agency didn't consider them, as Civil Beat reported. Andaya elaborated on that decision on a Tuesday interview. We would not use sirens in a case like this, he said. That's not what we normally would do. We just don't use sirens for fires. And that is, it says it's solar based and can be activated when the power is out. So that wouldn't be an excuse if power being out was an issue. Officials instead opted to activate warnings through people's cell phones, which we've already talked about. But electrical power and cell service was down in much of the area last Tuesday when the fire sparked and spread. In the end, many residents and visitors said they fled Lahaina after seeing or smelling smoke coming their way. So he says, in Andaya's view, the usefulness of the sirens is limited. It wouldn't have helped if we had sounded the sirens. To say that is not correct. To say based on your best judgment or how they've been used in the past, we don't feel like it would have been, it would have helped. I'm going to talk after this on what I think maybe could have been a more useful statement for them to provide, but let's continue reading. Even Adam Weintraub, a spokesman for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. So this is the first person was from Maui. This is from Hawaii Management Agency. Said in an interview on Monday that he's not certain sirens would have made a difference. The thing was big enough and hot enough to make its own weather, but I'm not sure that with a wall of flames moving at 40 or 50 miles an hour, that sounding a siren would have provided the level of advanced warning that I think people think. We'll be looking at as much data as we can get our hands on to figure out how this happened and what we could have done that would have improved our response and made people safe. Wildfires are going to be a bigger part of the threat picture here in Hawaii in the future. And so it says that the state's website says the sirens blow at 121 decibels, an uncomfortable level comparable to a jet plane taking off. Residents are familiar with the sounds due to monthly tests of the system. But Andaya suggested people indoors might not have been able to hear it, particularly with the intense winds that were blowing up to 80 miles per hour. It's an outdoor siren, so if you're in your home and watching TV or whatever the case may be, you may not hear a siren. Using the sirens, which the public tends to associate with tsunamis, could also send the wrong message to the public. What do you do if a siren sounds? You think, oh, I need to go Mauka, which is where we don't want them to go, he said, given that flames and winds were moving from the mountainside toward the ocean. According to Andaya, the most effective means of sending out an emergency notification in this case was a wireless emergency alert, or a WEA, and the emergency alert system, or EAS. Evacuation notices were pushed out through both, he said, although he couldn't remember at what times. The WEA system sends sound and text warnings to compatible cell phones. The EAS blares warnings via broadcasters on TV and radio, but the systems rely on cell towers and electricity, respectively. If those are out, the messages won't be delivered. We didn't even know that the power was necessarily down, he said. We do know that there were people who did receive the alert and notifications. We do know that many people were able to evacuate as a result. Some cell towers have backup generators, so Andaya said he believed they were still operational. The county also sent what's called MEMA alerts through a county system that sends emails, delivers text messages, and calls landlines. We just followed what we normally do, which is we put out a WEA and an EAS, he said. If you check the other Hawaii jurisdictions throughout the state, none to my knowledge has used sirens for fires. Andaya was on Oahu last Tuesday when the fire took over Lahaina. Asked if he or his agency would do anything differently, Andaya said no. We used the best system there was, he said. We feel with the resources we had available, this is the best response we could have done. At a press conference on Wednesday, both Andaya and Governor Josh Green declined to say whether sirens would be considered for fires in the future. Both said agencies will be reviewing their practices in light of the Lahaina catastrophe. Green noted when he first moved to Hawaii, people told him the sirens signified tsunamis. I mean, maybe there's a type of pulse or a frequency, like, two sirens going off means one thing. 3 pulses means something else. I mean, I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but if the siren system is there to denote warning, then it should be used for warnings, right? Especially with such a small island where things can happen so quickly. What if there's a mass shooting or a mass building collapse or something else that could, or like the power, like the cell phone towers burn or something happens, there needs to be a better system to get information across. We will find best practices and give updated information, Green said. There are going to be a lot of large changes that we hope to do. Good. I'm glad that he's saying this. Those changes will likely include moving power lines underground and increasing the state's satellite capacity, the governor said.
on the county's reasoning and reports of a lack of communication between agencies. We've been asking for days about the warnings for residents ahead of the fire. In a heated press conference today, they finally answered the questions.
Could be making its closest approach far to the south of Hawaii Island sometime early Tuesday morning.
Dry brush, also low relative humidity, and very gusty conditions.
Winds could be gusting upwards of 65 miles an hour.
The warnings were loud and clear. Counties started scrambling to get emergency operations centers activated. The EOC brings together the Emergency Management Agency along with first responder leaders, utility companies, bus and handy van operations, plus roads and parks. All this helps the county respond to a crisis quickly.
It cuts communication time. It cuts the time you have to search for resources. You have more brain power in one central location.
Every county had fires already burning Monday, August 7th. Kauai County activated their EOC at 9:30 Tuesday morning. Honolulu opened even earlier at midnight, and the Big Island at 4 a.m. Hawaii News Now had been asking Maui County for days if the EOC was activated and fully staffed. We finally got an answer after asking the question publicly during a press conference.
With Hawaii News Now. Can you tell us when the Maui County EOC was activated for the Lahaina fire and which agencies were there when the fire started moving toward the town Tuesday afternoon?
Maui EOC was activated on Monday evening at 9 o'clock. Partial activation because of the fires that was occurring out in Kula. And subsequently went to full activation the next day.
The EOC can also collectively decide if HAIMA should sound the warning signs. Andaya said the county chose not to do that, and he said he doesn't regret it.
It's used primarily for tsunamis, and that's the reason why many of them are found, almost all of them are found on the coastline. The public is trained to seek higher ground. Had we sounded the siren that night, we're afraid that people would have gone Malka.
The state's website designates sirens for all hazards, not just tsunamis. Some Maui residents believe the 121 decibel sirens could have saved lives by simply getting people's attention. Residents tell us common sense would have made them turn around if they saw the fire on higher ground. I'm Lynn Kawano, Hawaii News Now.
And you could see in the press conference that people were visibly upset and probably exhausted and tired and had very little sleep. And I'm sure that this was not easy for them. But a more appropriate response would have been, based on all the information that we had, based on the way that the siren warning system was used, and based on the intelligence that we had, we decided not to use it because we thought it would cause more problems, that we would have more casualties. We don't know what would have happened. We're not sure what would have happened if we would have sounded the sirens. But based on this information that we have now, we're sorry. We may have made a mistake. And we're going to use this information now to improve the system and have a better, more integrated system that can warn people of all disasters, not just tsunamis, but also earthquakes, fires, hurricanes, and wars. I think him apologizing and him admitting that it was a mistake would have gone a long way in subduing the criticism, right? It happened. You can't do anything now that the disaster happened and people's lives were lost. You can't do anything about bringing those people back, but you can always have learning lessons. And for him to defend that decision when he's not sure what would have happened, we're not sure what would have happened if they would have sounded the alarms because they didn't sound the alarms. I think that would have been a more appropriate response. Because really, them defending the decision sounds very tone deaf and disingenuous as far as being, caring about the people whose lives were lost. It sounded more like they were defending themselves and their positions rather than what's best for the community. So that's my take on that. These are not easy decisions. This is why I didn't like doing crisis communications. It is a thankless job. It is difficult. It is challenging. And I think that the best thing we can do now is look at learning lessons and see what, obviously hindsight is 2020, right? But I think that having the awareness and being able to say, hey, we made a mistake and this is what we're doing about it now goes a long way. So amidst all of this criticism, it says here, the embattled head of the Maui Emergency Management resigns after defending wildfire response. So the head, that being Herman Andaya, he submitted his resignation. This article is from last night. The Maui County Mayor, Richard Bison, made the announcement in a news release Thursday. Administrator Herman Andaya cited health reasons in his resignation. Given the gravity of the crisis we are facing, my team and I will be replacing someone in this key position as quickly as possible, and I look forward to making that announcement soon. Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear what you think in the comments. And it's just a very sad situation. And now you have the pets also. So let's just hold a moment of silence here for those who lost their lives, those who are still trying to find their lost loved ones and pets, and for those maybe who will lose their lives from this sad disaster. And let's see what we can do collectively to support these families who have lost basically everything, and including some maybe family members as well. So thank you for being here. Please hit the thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I support more of the survivors, missing persons, and others who need our support. But if you like that style, I'd appreciate if you subscribe if you haven't yet, and we'll be the empowering voices to support those who need our support, survivors, help them get their power back, and be a voice for the voiceless. So with that, I wish that you stay safe, stay thriving, trust your intuition, trust your gut, and make sure to keep it empowering. All right, everyone, bye for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for notifications. Thank you.